Welcome back to the Code With Me videos for Chapter 11. In this video, we're talking specifically about validating your CSS. Validating CSS is just as important as validating HTML, and it's just as easy. You should already have bookmarked the CSS validation page way back in the introduction chapter where you set up your work environment, but we have not yet used it. So now we will use it in our activity. So for activity 1125, we will validate your CSS. Since the majority of CSS, if you typed it just like we did, you should not have any errors, but we're going to create an error so that we can see what it looks like in the validator. Go ahead and pull up the CSS validator by going to jigsaw.w3.org/css-validator to go ahead and get it ready. Now, in the CSS by itself, we're just in the CSS file. We're going to be locating the letter spacing right here in the H1 rule and delete the semicolon at the end of the line. If you notice in brackets, it automatically highlights word spacing because, well, that's not exactly the appropriate rule. It doesn't know how to separate it. So word spacing is going to be white. So what we can do is we can actually go through, we can copy all of this, and we can say direct input, and we can paste it. Or if you want, you can do save this, file upload, and locate the file. Both should give you the exact same result. So now we go to the check item, and it says, hey, we have an error. Letter spacing missing a semicolon before the property name word spacing. And it means H1, which is the selector we have, and it's line 17. Well, let's break that down a bit. We take a look at our CSS file. We have line 17 right here, line 17, well, that's where word spacing is. H1, which is the selector right here. Value error, which means that we have a value error somewhere here. And letter spacing. Well, what's the issue with letter spacing? Well, we know what the error is with letter spacing because it's missing a semicolon before the property name word spacing, which is what brackets is trying to tell us. So if we put a semicolon here, we go back, we copy, we go back to the CSS for direct input, and we paste this. Now we have a nice big green bar. Okay, good. So now we have fixed our error. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to modify this just a little bit to see if you can actually test or figure out what the errors will be, and then we'll fix them one by one. Alright, so I've modified the file just a bit, and chances are you're not that experienced at CSS yet, but go ahead and just take a look and see if you can find the many mistakes I have made in this file. If for some reason you don't know where the errors are, let's go ahead and run this through the validator so we can actually identify the different errors. Highlight it all, go back to the validator, check, and hello, we have at least 2 errors. Okay, well, line 10 in the selector H1, line 10. Value error, text transform uppercase is not a text transform value. Well, what does that mean? That means that I typed in a dash between upper and case. I should delete that, and brackets gives me a nice coloration saying it's correct. Okay. Line 32, small. Line 32. Well, here's small and here's line 32. Property italicize doesn't exist. And italic, well, it's giving me the value of italic, but italicize doesn't exist. So what should I replace it with? I should replace it with font style. Okay, well, let's copy, let's paste, go back into the validator, check, and, well, it gave me the green bar, which is correct by validation purposes, but it's not developer friendly. Don't forget, the validator does not check for developer-friendly code. If you notice, in body, I have a font family of Tahoma, Verdana, and sans serif. Well, sans serif doesn't exist. So what we need to do is we actually need to make sure we have the fallback font of sans serif with the dash. Additionally, with HTML, font by itself is a shorthand, but because we only have one value, it's not necessarily a good or valid shorthand. So this should say font size. Now we should be back to square one. Let's just double check, copy, paste, put in the validator, check, and green bar again. So now by double checking to make sure all of our code is valid, we have our developer-friendly code to ensure that all rules are ordered to match the flow of the HTML. There's a single blank line between each rule, which is the recommendation, just to make things a little cleaner to load, or cleaner to read, I should say. There we go. Ensure all code except typeface and font names are lowercase, because you don't want to have anything such as font family. That doesn't make any sense at all. So make sure all the properties and values are lowercase aside from the font name, such as Goblin 1. If you just have a lowercase g, well, the browser doesn't know what to do with that. So if we refresh, pay attention to the H2, we refresh, okay, it may or may not work. It shouldn't work, but in this case it does. Let's see. Ensure every declaration is properly spaced with property, colon, space, values, and ending with a semicolon. Ensure all declarations are alphabetized by property. Yes, making it easy to organize and read. Ensure every closing curly brace is aligned to the selector with no indentation, as in this right here, not this. Ensure all declarations are aligned to each other and that the entire declaration block is indented 2 spaces inside the curly braces. What that means is basically, instead of being left aligned like this, which is very hard to read, you can have 2 spaces like that, or a tab over. Again, this is purely up to you whether you want to use tabs or spaces. Developers have gotten into arguments about tabs versus spaces. Ensure your CSS file ends with a single blank line. There we go, like all HTML files should, and save your changes. So we have done everything we can to this page, adding all of the items with all the things we discussed in Chapter 11, and we have valid code and developer-friendly code. So that is it for Chapter 11. If you have any questions about this or anything in Chapter 11, please let me know via email or via Twitter, and I'll get back to you with the best possible answer. If you have any questions about the assignments, please let me know as well so that I can help you out and we can find a solution together. Next week, we start Chapter 12, which includes CSS coloring and the box model.